In our very first interview, we welcome Dr. Dorothea Kaufmann, the study coordinator of the Pharmacy and Molecular Biotechnology program at Heidelberg University. Dr. Kaufmann is an expert in university didactics and science communication. She has been awarded with the Ars Legendi Prize for excellent university teaching and also is part of the City Council of Heidelberg. Mrs. Kaufmann, we are currently conducting this interview digitally because of the corona pandemic. And at least among students of our institute, you are known for educating with digital and uncommon methods like Mobile, to name one of your projects, which was a complementary quiz app for first-year students that was used alongside the introductory lectures. Did you see a necessity to recede a bit from classical teaching? And why did you choose to start experimenting with new methods?
Okay, so first of all, thank you so much for letting me speak about the thing I like best, teaching. And when I started teaching, I was still a PhD student and I had no idea how to do it, so I somehow grew into it. Then I did a lot of training, and so I became really an expert with a lot of certificates, which I really needed in Germany to prove that you're an expert. And I found out that it's much easier to teach in a way which is centered around the learner and not centered around the teacher. My very first attempts in shifting perspectives from teacher to learner were not very successful. Students did not like it at all, being asked questions all of the time and having homework and everything else. And so I rolled back a bit and I reintroduced little bits and pieces of the general techniques every now and then. As we were talking about Mobile, I'm giving the lecture basic biology in the first semester, and I was a bit fed up that a couple of students were not able to get along with the topics very well. And so I decided I will give them some special training, extra training, so when they come into my lecture hall in autumn, everybody will be equally well prepared. So Mobile is a free online app which can be used on any mobile device. It can also be used without internet, and it's optional for all students to use it. So in the very first tier, we have all the questions which should be covered in A-levels in Baden-Württemberg in biology for the major. And so all of the students who come into my class in October should know everything about high school biology. And it worked out pretty well. I traced back if all of the people used it, and 97.8% of the students did use it, some of them only once for a minute, others nearly every day for more than 1 hour. So I think the mean should be something once a week for 2 hours. And I was able to connect the usage time of Mobile with the grades received in the different exams, and there's definitely a connection. If you use Mobile, you will get a better grade. And I saw a lot of students having fun with Mobile. Sometimes I met some of them on the campus sitting together, one of them reading the questions from Mobile, the other ones shifting through books and papers and discussing. And this is exactly what I intended to do. Not to give the students something to do at home and sit alone in their rooms, but to interact with each other, to discuss science, because already in the first semester it is science. And I think a major point about learning is fun. I don't know what it's like for you, but if you have to learn something that is no fun at all, it will work very much harder. So for me, I'm a very visual person, so it's very easy for me to memorize things that are animated, especially in videos. So I can watch any kind of scientific video and I will recall nearly everything of it. I'm a very, very bad reading learner. And I found out that most of the young students, the youngsters, they are digital natives. So they grew up with the internet, they grew up with smartphones and everything else. And so I, as a teacher, want to go into their natural habitat and offer teaching on mobile devices using a lot of interaction throughout the internet and some discussion groups.
A key part in iGEM is also iGEM Human Practices is education. And we wanted to make the engagement to pupils a key part of our human practices, but are currently struggling a bit because of Corona. With your your experience in digital education, do you have made experience or tips for us how we could convey educational biology for pupils in a digital format?
So I think the easiest way is to open discussion rooms on any kind of meeting device. So me personally, at the moment, I'm giving a 1 hour open question format for pupils every day from 4 to 5 o'clock. I do not have children on my own, but all of my friends have plenty of them. And so every day from 4 to 5, I will be available on a chat room, and all children of all of my friends, they can just chime in, no matter how old they are. So on Monday and Wednesday, it's biology. Tuesday and Thursday, it's chemistry, and Friday is physics day. And it's very fruitful also to combine children of different ages and different school forms. So they will get into contact with each other. Sometimes I just lean back and they will explain everything to each other. And I think this is also a very good idea, because when you're able to explain science, you've really understood it. So at these times, as all of the pupils are sitting at home being homeschooled and staring into the computer all the day, maybe you just have to use the same channels with the pupils as well. And I think it's absolutely mandatory that we do not only address children in higher education, so in high schools, gymnasium, but we also have to reach children in Werksrealschule and Realschule. So we really have to boil down the science and the science communication to people who will not graduate with A-levels and who will not go to university afterwards, because all of these people need to be informed as well.
Yes, I think that's a really good tip. We've also noticed that the average pupil is kind of really late introduced to molecular and microbiology. And you already said that it's kind of a missed opportunity. Do you have concrete ideas for projects aiming for children not being in high school, but maybe in lower classes or something like that? How we could narrow down a project to these?
Yeah, you specifically have to target the deans of these schools. So it makes no sense contacting teachers for science classes, because they are not allowed to decide if they want to join any project outside of school. You have to target the deans of the schools. And as far as I know, most of them are interested, but the biggest problem is the money. So if you offer a lab course, which you pay for, like with CRISPR Whisperer project I'm doing together with friends from other universities to educate the common people in molecular biology, then it will be no problem. They will open their doors, they will welcome you, and the children will have a ton of fun. But you cannot ask for them to finance your teaching or your courses. This is just not possible. A friend of mine, he's the dean of a Realschule in Nordrhein-Westfalen, and his whole budget for lab courses per year, and the school has close to 800 pupils, is 1,500 euros for a whole year, for all classes, for 800 students. So you can see we are very, very lucky at university being able to spend so much money on everyday science.
Could you actually tell us a bit about, you mentioned CRISPR Whisper, are pupils actually able to also do some laboratory work at that event, or could you tell us about that a little bit?
So CRISPR Whisper is a project I did not know about since last year. The person in charge is Professor Wolfgang Nellen from University Kiel, and he invented this project to educate people, not only children, in techniques of CRISPR, genome editing, and things like that. So it's more or less a lab course which can be put up everywhere. So people will come around and they will bring everything with them. And they do a simple CRISPR-Cas9 experiment. So it's a blue-white selection. And children can see if we do something which is magic, aka science, it makes a difference. And it's not scary. And we will not drop that if we're in the same room with genetically modified organisms. And as this is also a political issue, I think it's very important to educate children about any kind of genetic modification, genetically modified organisms, and any kind of biotechnology, because only people who know what they are talking about can judge if something is really dangerous or not. So we planned the CRISPR Whisper course here in Heidelberg for the first weekend in April, but Corona. So CRISPR Whisperer was already done at very, very different schools all over Germany. And there were also some courses for grown-ups. And there was a special course for politicians held in Berlin for the members of the Bundesregierung. And it was extremely crowded. There were a lot of people who were really interested. Some of them only came to discuss and maybe be not so friendly, but most of them were very open-minded, and it was a huge success.
That sounds really cool, especially giving the course also to politicians. We've been thinking about also, if we have the ability to go to schools a bit later, is how to visualize synthetic biology. And we've heard about a project of yours where you're trying to use virtual worlds and things like that to visualize things like DNA or proteins. Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so that's another project. As you see, I do a lot of different things. And this is called Biowe. So it's the fourth dimension of biology. I've read a lot of interesting stories about virtual reality teaching, and I'm a little bit of a, video game buff myself. So I do have virtual reality equipment at home, and I do play these funny games. And I found out that you can get completely lost in them. So you start and you think, okay, it only has been 1 hour, and 3 hours later, you realize that now it's 3 hours later. And I think this can be applied for teaching as well, because when you're immersed in all of the knowledge, it will be much easier to gather knowledge. And I'm following a game-based approach. So at the moment, I'm working together with the Hochschule der Medien in Stuttgart. So they are experts in virtual reality. And Professor Sabia Gelal and Professor Gottfried Zimmermann, both of them are professors for games designs and virtual reality teaching. And, they are more the technical guys. I'm doing the didactics. So at the moment, we are working on a game which is aimed at DNA. So it will be explained what DNA is. So you can stand in the cell and look at the DNA, how it is formed, how it works with all the mRNA and the other things going on. And we will have some special features. For example, if your cell will be infected by any kind of pathogen, or if some cancer forms, and you can get points for saving your cell or saving your scientist. So all of these cells are usually a whole scientist that you have to save, or you can also kill her if you feel like it. And it will be a little bit, I don't know, do you know Plague Inc? It's a video game.
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
This was the initial spark because all of us are playing this game. And so we thought, why not put it into context with teaching? And this immersive teaching, when you're not sitting in a normal room or in a lecture hall and there's somebody in front talking to you, but when you're using your virtual reality device, you're really immersed in knowledge and you have your own way of learning and at your own speed. And you can spend more or less time in this immersive framework. And for the very first step, it's only a very tiny section that we can do in VR, but we plan to open this to other topics as well, because I found out that sometimes for students, it's a little bit hard to understand what is going on in a cell at the same time, at what speed. And so if we can add more and more features to our virtual cell, I think this would make it much easier to understand. And I also plan to make it available for doctors to explain surgeries to patients. And we are also planning, if we get more funding, and if we get even more funding, we want to do a special for children. Because sometimes children have major problems coping with illnesses of their parents, especially connected to cancer. Here with the German Cancer Research Institute, I know a lot of people there who always tell me, how can we explain to the children, first of all, what cancer is and what we can do about it? And I think if we could develop a children-based VR model of cancer and the different ways of treating it, this would also be a major help for them.
Really interesting. You've mentioned the German Cancer Research Center. What I found interesting, they had a scandal with animal testing last year. I think it was before then. I mean, we can kind of discuss how big the issue with the animal testing scandal really was. But what the Cancer Research Center then did is that they went on the marketplace in Heidelberg and did talk to people from the society and explain people why they're doing animal testing, why that is important. So does science communication need to sneak into the everyday life of people to be heard?
We don't have to sneak. We just turn up there and say, here I am, listen to me. No, it's not about being sneaky. I think these times with Corona, it's a gift for all of us scientists, because suddenly the world is listening to scientists and they are believing scientists. And there's a massively popular podcast by Professor Drosten, and millions of people are listening to it. This is amazing. I think this is the best time for science communication ever. As you see, I'm really excited about this. And I think everybody who's an expert in science, and I do think that students are experts too, we have to educate all the people around us. So you can either you can have some kind of setup in the marketplace or in Hauptstraße and get in contact with people, because usually people will not call you and ask you for your opinion. You have to go to these people. And also with your families and friends, you can talk about general science. And I think nowadays it's our duty to society to talk about the pandemic, to talk about any kind of weird theories that are out there, which are just plain wrong and endangering people. And we cannot sit in our institutes and our universities and wait for the magic phone call by some person who wants to know something. We have to go to them. So we have to give and not to wait until we are asked.
One last question, maybe. We also thought about organizing a science slam for the general public, where we invite several iGEM teams from all over Europe to Heidelberg to present their work and their future plans for their iGEM projects. It's probably something which is not going to work with Corona, but we do plan to host the Science Slam electronically then. And for the analog version, we thought about inviting people with posters and all of these things to advertise an event. That obviously is not possible like we thought anymore. Do you have any advice how to reach as many people from the public as possible, although we're only doing it digitally?
So these are hard times because there's a ton of things going on the internet every single day. You can go to operas, to museums, everywhere else. So there's a stiff competition. I think the key is word of mouth. So if you do plan a digital event, it's important that you have a decent amount of time beforehand to make it public. I recommend at least 8 weeks. You have to team up with social media. And although I truly hate Instagram, it's the single most important social, well, for me, it's not even social media, it's just a nuisance. So you have to market on Instagram. You have to market on Facebook and even TikTok. I'm not joking. People are doing science on TikTok. That's scary. But anyway, it's centered around the group you want to reach. And you should also cover traditional media, printed media, because people are still reading this. And as you will not want to exclude a certain, amount of people, for example, the ones who are not familiar with the internet and still reading printed newspapers, you should also cover that. And do not spend any money on marketing, because if you can somehow reach to get viral, you can have short videos, maybe even an Instagram story. And if you somehow get it into this whole bubble of influencing and viral teardowns, then it should work. So I hosted a webinar last week, and we did all of this. And it worked out pretty well. It was a political issue, but it was more than 280 people attending. And this is a very good quota for something that is a very small topic amongst all others and has nothing to do with Corona.
Thank you very much for your advice and your experiences with different methods you used. And I believe we can use a lot of that for our work in iGEM. What especially interested me is that you're also teaching these children for Corona instead of school. I think that's something we might be thinking about introducing ourselves as well. And also your advice about the Science Slam, I believe that's really valuable.
I'm looking forward to the Science Slam, really. I'm totally digging it. Yeah, looking forward to it. Thank you for taking the time. And I'm looking forward to your marvelous project, and I'm very sure that you will succeed in everything you want to.